Sword Art Online. It's rare that an anime so influential can inspire so much vitriol among so many people. For many people, such as myself, this is the show that got us into anime. And this show is without a doubt a huge reason for the explosion in popularity of anime in the West. It's a show that was so influential that every season we have to suffer through countless horrible and painfully generic isekai. So then, why is this show hated with such a passion among so many people? When I decided to rewatch this show a few weeks ago, that's the main question I wanted to answer. It's a question that we've seen answered 1,000 times in 1,000 different YouTube videos, but I was a bit surprised with what I found when I rewatched it. I wanted to make this video to really explore the first 14 episodes, which is the Aincrad arc, and explain why I think the show is a little bit overhated. Is it a masterpiece? Spoiler alert, no, definitely not. This show definitely has its issues, and I'm going to talk about as many of them as I can. But generally speaking, I didn't hate my time rewatching the show as much as I thought I would. But before we get into that, I want to say I will be recapping most of the major plot points in the show, so obviously major spoiler warning if you somehow haven't watched this 10-year-old show at this point. By the way, this video has been absolutely murderized by copyright claims, so I've had to kind of drastically scale back the amount of actual footage from the show that is in this video, but I've tried to keep as much as I can. But if you're wondering why there's like random video game footage in between, that's why. Just roll with it. It's a show about video games, so it kind of makes sense. Hopefully that will allow me to at least use some footage from the show where it's relevant. So yeah, just want to give you a heads up on that. You'd be hard pressed to find someone that wasn't initially enthralled with the premise of Sao. It's part of the reason that the show exploded in popularity when it came out. Even today, with how oversaturated the isekai genre is, the premise of Sao still stands out to me. And the key reason for this is how important the world outside the game is. 95% of isekai completely gloss over the world the character came from, or just gloss over it entirely. The idea of being trapped in the game gives everyone a purpose and a goal while elevating the stakes to the max by having it so that if you die in the game, you die in real life. The world of Aincrad is also very compelling. The video game aesthetic works perfectly because, it's actually a video game. So many isekai use this video game system for no reason, and it always feels forced and really cringe. Here it fits perfectly, and the way the menus work is very satisfying. There's also the premise that there's no magic in the game, which in my opinion makes things much more interesting. I'd honestly love to play an MMO that was completely focused on one combat system. It seems like it would be insanely fun. In this episode, Kirito meets Klein and shows him the ropes. Since Kirito has played the beta and Klein is new, they mess around killing boars and introducing the combat system until they go, uh-oh, we can't log out. After speculating for a bit as to why they are teleported to the town center, where it is revealed that the game maker has trapped them in the game. The reveal of all this is, it's okay, nothing egregious, but also nothing crazy. They do a pretty good job capturing the fear everyone must be feeling in a moment like this, and I like that they all have to use their real appearance at the end. The blood effects from Kaguya are a little over the top, but it was 2012, so I can forgive some things looking a little weird here. After this, Kirito and Klein part ways, as Kirito wants to get ahead of everyone, but Klein wants to stick with his friends. This works fine. It sets up Kirito as a tryhard solo player. Klein is a charismatic but loyal friend. Main characters we meet here are Kirito, Klein, and Kaguya. I'll talk more about these characters later, but overall at this point Kirito and Klein definitely don't stand out too much, but their introductions work for setting up the premise. I like Kaguya's introduction because of the mystery it sets up, like super genius that traps everyone in a death game with no explanation. Throughout the whole Aincrad arc, you're wondering what his motivation was, and even if we never get a good answer, it's still a compelling setup. And overall, this is a decent introduction to the story. Oh boy, next up is the beater episode. This episode starts in a meeting where a bunch of people are grouped up talking about taking down the first boss, and we get to see Kirito struggle to find a party, which further emphasizes his loner vibes, but ultimately is just about the end of the character development for him in this episode, which is pretty disappointing. Only other thing is we get to see him being nice to Asuna for like 5 minutes. We also meet Asuna, and she's a edgy loner that parties up with the boy Kirito. There isn't really much here other than introducing them to one another, but that's okay. It's not really what the episode is focused on. The interesting part of the episode is the dynamic it draws between the beta testers and the non-beta testers. A few months have passed in the game at this point, and those who didn't play the beta are pissed because they feel like the beta testers abandoned them to go abuse the game systems that they only knew because they got to play the beta. Because of this, they were able to get far ahead and weren't incentivized to help out newer players at all. I like this dynamic because if you haven't played an MMO at launch, you know this is absolutely how it would play out. It adds a lot to the tension between these two groups. The new players still need help from the beta testers because they're the strongest, but they're pissed at them at the same time because they kind of left them out to dry. After partying up and taking strats, we eventually get to the boss fight. All goes well until the boss enrages and changes stances. Kirito realizes it's different than the beta and speaks up to try to save the group leader, which in the process reveals him as a beta tester. Turns out the leader dude was also a beta tester and died trying to greed for the last hit to get the rare drop. Kirito does the Kirito thing and rolls the boss with Asuna with some Asuna swaps, the classic lines. The damage is done though, and the group leader dies, and the rest of the group begins to celebrate, but quickly some start to turn on Kirito for being a beta tester. Kirito then decides he has to do some Batman shit and accept that he's the bad guy in order to unite the group. We then get the absolute iconic beater line. It's okay, but it's kind of weird. It does like an okay job as cementing Kirito as this sort of lone wolf, but at the same time, it doesn't seem super necessary for Kirito to act the way he does. I feel like he could have just talked them down, being like, yo, I'm a beta tester, but I helped you out. I don't know. It seems a little forced, but that's okay. Episode 3 is probably the best in the series in my opinion, and I think that this episode is the reason why so many were disappointed in the show, even if they couldn't pinpoint it as such at the time that they watched it. This episode is absolutely essential for showing us the brutal emotional stakes of the show. This episode starts off with Kirito hanging out with a small group of players he just saved. He lies about his level, and they ask him to join their guild. He reluctantly agrees, which seems strange to me, but since we've established Kirito as a nice guy at this point, it doesn't seem too weird that he'd be fine with joining up with a small guild for a while to help them out. The most important member of the guild is undoubtedly Saatchi, who runs with the guild even though she's terrified of dying. Kirito spends a lot of time comforting her, telling her she will be okay, that he'll protect her, and assuring her that she will absolutely not die. This makes Saatchi happy, but it's also pretty clear based on the message she records for Kirito that she knows it's only a matter of time. I think deep down, it's clear that Kirito knows she won't survive long, and part of the reason he's assuring her she won't die so often is he's trying to convince himself of the same thing. The game world is absolutely brutal, and it only takes one mistake to end up dead. It's not really a world where a group of as casual as this can survive, no matter how hard he wishes they would. I think this is the first time we have some really interesting character dynamics. The throwaway guys of the group aren't really developed at all, which sucks a bit, but I think the others make up for it. You have the good-hearted guild leader that genuinely cares for everyone but is incredibly naive of the danger he puts the group in and the brutal reality of the world. Then you have Saatchi, who understands how brutal the world is, but faces it despite her tremendous fear because she can't bring herself to abandon her friends. It's really sad and powerful when she asks Kirito to run away with her and says that if she had the courage to kill herself, she would have done so a long time ago. Kirito's somewhere in the middle of these two. Even though their ideas are contradictory, he understands the danger the group is in more than anyone, but at the same time, seems to think that the guild leader might just be able to make it to the top. Up until now, Kirito's been a pretty flat character, and this sets up a really interesting way to develop him after the inevitable tragedy strikes. The tragedy comes on what they expect to be an easy dungeon run, when the guild leader isn't even there with them. The dumb side characters in the guild fall for a stupidly obvious trap, and they're instantly swarmed by enemies. The side characters die in like 2 seconds, which is kind of hilarious. And soon it's only Kirito and Saatchi left. Saatchi gets rolled over, and Kirito isn't even able to hear her last words. He, of course, survives because he's OP. And when he goes back to tell the guild leader, he gets pissed at Kirito for lying to them and blames him for their deaths and then kills himself, which is pretty fucking savage. The episode ends with a very emo Kirito trying desperately to track down an item to revive Saatchi so he can hear her last words. He finds it by killing a Christmas boss and gets even emo-er when he realizes he needs to use it within 10 seconds of their death. He goes back to his room to be sad, but then he gets a message from Saatchi that had been preemptively sent to be delivered on Christmas Day, as she assumed she would be dead by then, which is pretty heartbreaking, but adds a lot to Saatchi's character. Her message assures him that it wasn't his fault, and thanks for all the time he spent helping her and her friends. They do a really good job at showing all this emotional turmoil Kirito has been experiencing over the last few months finally boil over and break him after hearing this message. It's a pretty touching scene, and I think it works well, but I think it would have been nice to add some line from Saatchi along the lines of "don't give up on people yet," or something to make it less jarring in the next episode when he's back to grouping out with people and helping them out, because it feels like the next logical step for his character would be to fully embrace the Sigma mentality and go solo forever. But even without this, I guess the emotional reaction to this message still helps a bit to remedy this, and they give a few other reasons that help with this as well. I think the most jarring part of the way this episode starts off is that it feels like Kirito should be more cynical here. He's kind of just normal, smiley Kirito when he runs into Silica. I know time has passed, but it feels like he should be acting more cold here. He can still help her out, but he shouldn't be this warm at this point, in my opinion. We later learned that he was mostly using her as bait, which does make sense, but it feels like this isn't hugely important because of how nice and friendly he acts. He uses her as bait to capture a group of criminals that killed off an entire guild as the wish of the surviving guild leader, and this definitely makes sense. You can definitely see why he would want to do this. With the introduction of Silica, we get the introduction of the Eki harem elements of the show. I think this is really annoying, but it's also kind of a product of the time it was made. Literally every show I remember watching around this time was some sort of harem, and I really respect this show that it at least committed to a romance. But it does serve to make the harem aspects even more annoying. I'll talk more about this later, but I wanted to touch on it here since this is the first time we see it. There isn't too many important things that happen in this episode. Kirito meets the lolly, her pet is dead, he takes her to a high-level floor in order to revive the pet. Spooky lady that leads Orange Player Guild tries to rob them of the revive item. Kirito murks them all. Everyone's happy, hooray. We get the iconic scene where like 10 guys are trying to slice up Kirito, but he's just standing there, just out-regenerating their damage. Overall, there's nothing egregious about this episode, but damn dude, the episode this is following is so emotionally heavy, and then we just go to this, it feels a little wrong. They needed to do a little more to show how the events of last episode have changed Kirito. Like, if you compared episode 2 Kirito and episode 4 Kirito, they are pretty much exactly the same, which is really a huge problem. We really need to see some indication of how Kirito's mindset or philosophy on life has changed after what happened to him in the last episode. Almost all the emotional momentum from the previous episode is lost here, which really is a huge shame. Oh boy, with episode 5 we get the reunion of Asuna and Kirito. My first impression when these two meet again is just how painfully basic both of their personalities are. Every once in a while you get a tiny bit of sunder from Asuna or a little bit of wit from Kirito, but it's not really much, and it makes their interactions really boring. This is definitely just the beginning of their relationship, though, so I'll save most of my comments on that for later on. Most of this episode is spent setting up the mystery of how the dudes are dying in the town, which is supposed to be a safe zone. It's like all the members of the guild that found a rare item and had a falling out are mysteriously dying, and Asuna and Kirito need to find out why. I think on my first watch I remember enjoying this, but knowing it all it's all just like a meme trick. It really makes this mini arc super boring. These are 2 full episodes of Asuna and Kirito playing detective, and at this point in their relationship, their conversations are just so boring. Like, compare their interactions now to some better written characters like Mai and Sakura in the first few episodes of Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. Even when those two aren't in a relationship, their chemistry is electrifying. It's so much fun to watch them interact with one another every time they're on the screen. There's absolutely nothing close to that level of chemistry between Asuna and Kirito, and it really just makes this episode a slog to get through. Throughout the episode, 2 people from the guild mysteriously die in the safe zone, and all we know is that the weapon was made by a former member of the guild, Grimrock. Oh my god, shocker, they weren't dead. They faked it using item durability. It literally takes 10 minutes of exposition to explain all this. Literally half the episode of Kirito just explaining what happened. It's really bad. Also, the girl not removing Asuna from her friends list is a hilariously stupid oversight. No shot you go through all that preparation and forget something so stupidly simple. Randomly, after 2 more minutes of Schmidt talking to the other 2 more about what happened, they randomly get ganked by some orange players. And oh no, they're the Laughing Coffin, which, all memes aside, is a pretty great name for an evil guild. It's been memed to death, but I still like it a lot. But surprise, Kirito shows up at the last second because he's Kirito. And they all run away because, they're not going to fight Kirito. He's Kirito. This dude not only just detective out exactly how they faked their death, but also that it was Grimrock that killed his wife and Grimrock that sent the Laughing Coffin to kill them. It's pretty comical how perfectly he nails all the details because he dropped the sandwich that Asuna made for him. Grimrock is really psycho. He killed his wife because she wasn't submissive enough in the game world. He literally gives like the most detestable reason for killing his wife, and then randomly his old guildmates are just like, whatever, it's okay, we'll take care of him, and walk away with him. Like, what? There's some cute foreshadowing of Asuna and Kirito's marriage. It's a nice way to offset how awful the ending of this mini arc was. The fact that they randomly see Griselda's ghost kind of tilts back into the being awful ending, though. Overall, I definitely don't like this episode or this mini arc at all. It's the start of Asuna and Kirito's relationship, and I promise I will eventually have some good things to say about that. But at this point, it's still pretty underwhelming. I do think that their chat at the very end is cute, but that was the only interaction so far that I had any emotional reaction to. Oh boy, another addition to the harem. Honestly, Liz isn't too bad. Definitely not as cringe as Silica, in my opinion. She at least has a strong personality, which is something I value a lot. Her quirks at least make her somewhat memorable, even if she's pretty basic Sunder. Kirito goes on a quest with Liz in this episode to kill a dragon in order to get materials for a new sword. A funny detail is that he just has the Elucidator in this episode. He gets his iconic sword just in between episodes off camera. Anyways, though, this episode is about him making the less cool looking sword with the help of Liz. I like that when they get to the dragon, he snaps at Liz when she insists on helping him. This definitely feels like how Kirito would respond over the trauma of losing his entire guild. I just wish we had more of these like darker moments when Kirito's helping people out. Kirito fights a very bad CG dragon next, but whatever, it was like 2012, so I can't hate the visuals too much. He beats up the dragon because he's Kirito, he's OP, but Liz comes out of cover too early and ruins everything because she's about to get bodied, so Kirito has to save her, and they fall into like a massive random hole that was just in the middle of the place they were fighting. And Kirito almost dies of fall damage, which I thought was pretty hilarious. They go to sleep for the night, and Kirito has some really cringe lines. Like, I'd rather die with someone than let someone die alone. That was pretty cringe. Liz asks to hold his hand, and he does for some reason. Totally not leading her on, by the way. And by the end of the episode, we learn he's already fucking with Asuna at this point, so it's pretty messed up for him to do this. To toy with Liz like this. Bad CG dragon rolls out right when they wake up, though, and they use it to fly out. then free fall from the sky, and she's like, Daisuke des, but he can't hear her over the wind, which is pretty eye roll worthy, but whatever. They get back, and she's like, I'm gonna tell him how I really feel after I make him the sword. But then Asuna rolls up, and she goes emo mode because she realizes that, he's with Asuna. And she stealths away to go cry, but of course Kirito somehow realizes this and knows where to find her and goes to comfort her. Some cringe dialogue later, and we're finally done with this episode. I know I've been laughing quite a bit reading through some of the stuff I wrote down for this, but it's really so ridiculous. The end of this episode is just like, it's like so over the top cringe that it like almost comes back around to being funny to me, and I just kind of sit there laughing the whole time as Liz, like, her whole emotional state starts crumbling down. Just the way they present it is so ridiculous, and the way that they just have Kirito completely lead her on is just so brutal but so funny at the same time. Next up is the first date episode. So premise for this is that Kirito gets a rare food drop that only Asuna can cook. So oh my god, they have to have it together. So wow, it is a date. It is so convenient. Asuna has some simp from her guild that doesn't want her to be alone with Kirito, but she just blows him off, and their date is underway. Even though these characters are so bland, it's pretty undeniable how cute it is watching them hang out together this way. Something about it is just calming. It's really hard not to have a smile on your face when you watch it. These quiet and relaxing moments are so important, and it really shows when characters this basic can become likable, at least a little bit, because of one of these moments. There are modern action shows with better characters that fall in love, but you don't feel as connected to them when they don't take the time to just like have a nice calm episode like this, where you can really see them start to fall for each other. I think it's really interesting when they start to talk to each other about how it feels like they were born and raised in the game at this point, as if the other world never existed. They've been in the game for 2 years at this point, and it's been long enough to where this just feels like normal life now. They talk about how lately less and less people have been trying to even beat the game, as they've just gotten used to living here, which makes a lot of sense. In reality, I imagine some people would even get to the point where they just prefer this fake world and support the idea of never clearing the game. It's pretty interesting to think of philosophically that in a fake world created this well and immersively, where they have no connection to their real bodies, like how fake really is it at that point? If this becomes your life for long enough, is it really any less of a life? I really love how much time passes throughout the duration of the show. Compared to most modern shows, 2 years of time and 8 episodes is a really, really long time, like barring a time skip. It makes some of the bad development at least a tiny bit more forgivable, as we're at least able to rationalize some of the things because of the passage of time. It would be better if things were just developed properly, but I think the speed time passes is pretty interesting and at least helps to accommodate for some of these things. Despite all of this, though, they both agree they want to go back to the real world. I think it would be much more interesting if, like, for instance, Kirito didn't want to go back, but maybe Asuna did. I mean, if you think about it, he is insanely OP, and surely he feels a little bit more powerful or important in this world. I would think he would be pretty content with life as he has it now, as opposed to his old one. Even if his old life wasn't bad, surely it wasn't as good as this. I mean, he's like literally one of the strongest players in this world. It would create a really interesting dynamic if his relationship with Asuna is kind of what convinced him that he wanted to go back. After the date, they agree to party up, but oh no, Simp is back and he doesn't want Asuna hanging out with Kirito. So Kirito 1v1s him for Asuna, and of course Kirito rolls him, just shatters his sword with one swing because he's Kirito. Then the Simp gets really angry, but he leaves, and then Asuna and Kirito go have some fun clearing a dungeon, eventually make it to the boss where this episode ends. So this episode starts with Kirito and Asuna running away from the boss, because it is too scary. So then we get a cute little lunch scene with Asuna and Kirito. These characters are still pretty dull, but at least when they're together, there's something there. Even if it's just, basic, generic cuteness. It's still an unbelievably uninteresting relationship, but at least, it's got me smiling some of the time when I'm watching it. Maybe there's something about how dull each of their characters are that just makes you a little happy when they're together. It maybe just feels right for some reason. I'm not sure. I still really appreciate that the show takes time to slow down with these kinds of scenes. Klein shows up with the boys, and we get some decently funny interactions with Kirito, Asuna, and Klein. I definitely wish Klein was more developed throughout the series, but it's still pretty hard not to like the guy. He clearly cares a lot for Kirito, even though they don't see each other too often. He doesn't have anything to gain from worrying about this random solo player, but he does anyway. We see this when he pulls Asuna aside to tell him that Kirito is weird and gloomy, but he's actually a good guy. And at the end of the episode, when he's brought to tears by the fact that Kirito still cares about people enough to risk his own life. I love all these ideas, but oh my god, I just wish Kirito fit this description a little bit more, as it feels like this is how the writers want him to be. It's just not quite how he actually is. 99% of the time, he's not like a gloomy edgelord. Like, he seems like a normal, like, happy dude that's like always willing to help people out. I do really think Klein is one of the stronger characters. He's at least very likable. He's just that dude that is just a genuine nice guy. And there's not much more to him than that. We don't see him much, but at least there's something to his character, and I enjoy it when he shows up most of the time. And after the introduction of Klein and Asuna, some random squad of soldiers roll up. And they are like, oi, show us the boss room. And Kirito is like, sure, here's the map, but maybe don't try to kill it with just this little squad you got. But for some reason, they decide to completely ignore all this and just go for it. And Kirito and the boys have to save them all. Kirito reveals the dual wield skill, and we get the gotta go faster, which is pretty funny. I enjoy it. Some cringe moments, but it's a fun action sequence. I wish Asuna was portrayed a little stronger, just because, she's, like second in command of one of the most OP guilds. Feels like she should be a little more OP than she's depicted here, but she definitely doesn't seem as OP as Kirito, and kind of gets like rolled over right away. I guess when maybe she's used to fighting with a much larger group, so maybe it makes sense. The fight ends, and we get Kirito, the Kirito Klein scene I was referring to earlier, as they part ways. I just wish Kirito was less of a bland character at this moment. It would have hit much harder. Feels like Asuna is a little heavy-handed with how she just hugs him for like 3 minutes. Like, just tell him you love him already, damn. Episode ends with her telling Kirito she's going to take time off from the guild so they can party up. But guild leader isn't having any of that, and now Kirito has to 1v1 him for Asuna, which is a tad strange. I don't know why Asuna couldn't just be like, lol, no, I'm out of here. This episode is the big duel between Kirito and the leader of the Knights of the Blood Oath, aka Kabaya. But we don't know that yet. So the fight is honestly pretty fun to watch. Easily the most entertaining so far, in my opinion. It's still 2012, so no Demon Slayer, but it looks pretty good. It doesn't last too long, though, as Kirito gets rolled over pretty quick. And oh boy, now he has to join the Knights of the Blood Oath. So Kirito and Asuna are chilling after that, and he tells her about the moonlit black cats. When she asks why he's avoided guild so much. It's a nice moment, only undercut by how hard she baits the kiss. Like, oh my god. The relationship is so weirdly ambiguous at this point, by the way. Like, they're basically together, but also aren't. It's a very strange dynamic they have going on. Nothing like a near-death experience to close that gap, though, I guess. Kirito has to do some training with the simp he humiliated a few episodes ago. Turns out the simp joined Laughing Coffin and plans to kill Kirito for humiliating him. He paralyzes Kirito and the squad leader and absolutely rolls the squad leader guy in like 10 seconds. Kirito's about to die, but then he remembers he hasn't got to fuck Asuna yet, and he breaks through the paralysis enough to rip the sword out of his chest a little bit. It buys enough time for Asuna to roll up, so hooray, he's saved. Apparently, she sees Godfrey disappear on the map, so she runs to them. It's reasonable enough, I guess. Maybe you can see guildmates on the map. It's not the most outlandish explanation in the show, that's for sure. She rolls over the sim in like 2 seconds, which is kind of cool. First time where there's really been like, oh damn, she is OP. Unfortunately, though, she hesitates finishing him off, so she almost dies. But don't worry, though, because Kirito's poison wore off just in time for him to White Knight her. He gets his hand cut off, which I guess is a mechanic in this game, and then punches the dude to death. Side note, I don't know why he like falls to his knees after literally every fight. I guess he's tired, but it's a little strange considering, he's like in a video game, but I don't know, it's just weird. Asuna starts crying and says it's all her fault. Instead of reassuring her, he just kind of stares at her until she starts saying how she should, and then he surprises her by going in for the kiss. All memes aside, it's a pretty nice moment, especially because of how caught off guard she is. Only slightly undercut by how cringy the Kirito dialogue after is. When he says, "My life belongs to you," like, chill out, dude. You kissed her one time. Maybe dial it back a little bit. Pledges to get her to the real world, and wow, how much more powerful would this moment have been if prior to this he had said he wanted to stay in this world forever. But whatever, the dude must be competing with himself to draw the cringiest bar possible, because after that he says, "I want to be with you tonight," which is just weird for so many reasons. If he's saying like, "I want to fuck," it's a really strange way to say that. And the fact that we later learn that he doesn't mean it this way makes it an even stranger thing to say. She thinks he wants to fuck, though, which is pretty reasonable, and she's like, "Yee, let's go." So they go back to her place, and it's pretty funny how she psychs herself up to get undressed, though. She's clearly out of her comfort zone, and things get even more awkward when she realizes that Kirito wasn't talking about sex when he said that line. It's really cringe, but it humanizes them a little bit, I guess, if I'm looking at it in the most charitable way possible. I think after that they do end up fucking. It's kind of unclear, but going off the manga, they definitely do. And then they talk about the real world a bit again. Asuna says she had a dream that everything in this world was only a dream. A little confusing, I know, when you say it like that, but and she was scared it never happened, even though they resent Kaguya and want out. Like, these 2 years have really clearly been very important to them. It's actually crazy how consistently these allusions to the real world are so interesting. Falling in love is arguably one of the most important things we do in life, and these two have done it in what is a fake world, but it doesn't make those feelings any less real, to them at least. If only the dialogue was a tiny bit better, maybe this would hit even harder. After that, they decided to chill with the fighting for a bit, take time off to be with each other for a while. Kirito suggests they move out to a small village surrounded by lakes. Pretty cute, pretty normal. Then he just escalates that to saying that they should get married. Like, dude, chill out. Like, you fucked her one time. Like, this is just not okay. Talk about an absolute recipe for disaster. Of course, though, she says yes, because why not, I guess. And imagine how much one more episode would have done of them just being a couple to make this feel less insane. Overall, though, is this a good episode? No, not really. So many moments are so cringe. So much awful dialogue. For some reason, though, I do still enjoy this episode, and I hate myself a little bit for that, but come on, dude, who doesn't love the start of the relationship episode? Like, it's pretty wholesome. So here Kirito and Asuna run away to a lower floor to chill for a while. First thing we see is them chilling on a balcony with their ring, so we missed the wedding, I guess, but they're married. They see some generic, lovey stuff, and then Kirito asks if the relationship will still exist in the real world. Asuna gets a little annoyed at this, of course, and says that, of course it will. It's another nod to one of the only interesting things happening with these characters, which is the unique situation they're in. Helps to make their relationship at least a little deeper. Other than that, there's some genuinely cute moments, like when he's talking to, when she is talking to him in his sleep, but nothing much else of note. Time passes, and Austin and Kirito have been just kind of vibing, hanging out, doing the, boyfriend-girlfriend stuff. Then we see them go on a date where Kirito takes Asuna into what he says is a haunted forest and teases her about tales villagers told him about spirits that wander there. It's a pretty funny moment that comes to an end when Asuna sees what she thinks is a ghost, but is actually a random little girl. They have no idea if she's a player or an NPC, but they take her back to their house. She wakes up the next morning, tells them her name is Yui, but she can't remember anything else. She starts calling them mom and dad. So now in the span of like 20 minutes, for us as a viewer, they're not only married but also have a kid, which is just unbelievably jarring, honestly. Whatever though, they roll with it, and I guess they're parents now. They decide to look for Yui's parents, so they go to the town of beginnings to look around. They find some army guys bullying some orphans, just normal stuff. And Asuna beats them up, which is a nice change of pace, I guess, because usually Kirito is the one that gets to roll over the bullies. The day is saved, but Yui gets full-on possessed and starts talking all creepily about everyone's hearts and how she was alone in the dark for so long. It's really strange. I'm gonna be real, this episode is pretty cringe to me. The kids ruin everything, and Yui gets in the way of an episode that should be taking time to make us care about Kirito and Asuna's relationship. They have had some enjoyable and cute moments up to this point, but that can only carry a relationship for so long before there needs to be at least some substance to keep me interested. The Yui saga continues in episode 12. Very exciting. This episode starts at least with a kind of interesting topic. The kids that were in Sao. The orphan leader lady talks about how the kids that were playing were all traumatized by being trapped in a death game, and how she founded the orphanage to give them a place to stay. It's an interesting idea, and it makes sense that kids would kind of freak out upon realizing that they were trapped in this death game. Some lady rolls up then and asks Asuna and Kirito to save her boyfriend named Thinker. I guess he was asked to meet unarmed deep in a dungeon for peace talks, and somehow thought that wasn't weird, and what do you know, it was a trap. They go to the dungeon. Kirito starts murdering things. Yui starts laughing like a psychopath. Nothing really too exciting going on. Asuna and Kirito have a funny scene arguing about frog legs, but it's cut off by more Yui cringe. I really can't stand anytime she opens her mouth. The dialogue is just so awful. It reminds me of watching a movie with a really horrible child actor in it. They find the Thinker dude, big scary murder scythe guy, comes out, rolls over Asuna and Kirito, but oh wait, turns out Yui is an admin, so she just deletes the boss. It's revealed that she is the mental health program of the game, but when Kaguya went crazy mode and locked everyone in the game, she wasn't allowed to interact with the players anymore. There was so much suffering among the players that she started error coding out, but then saw Kirito and Asuna happy together and wanted to learn from them or something. It was weird. This is all so weird, and it just feels so irrelevant to the plot of the characters. It feels like it was just completely shoehorned in so that we could have an excuse to see Asuna and Kirito with a kid, but it's really just so unnecessary. They're in high school. It's not weird for them to not have a kid. They tell her she's more than just a program, blah, blah, blah. She says she wants to stay with them forever, but she's going to get deleted because she's a mess with the game. They all start crying. She disappears. Kirito saves her data to an item so she can come back home sometime. Wow, these last two episodes have just been such a slog to get through. I really hate them a lot. Even though normally I kind of love these chill dating episodes, it's just ruined by these boring Yui plotline and Yui's cringe character. Yui episodes are done though. Now we're on to the fishing episode. So right off the bat, it's pretty noticeable here that Kirito shows more personality than he has in a while. He agrees to help the old man catch fish, but all the while is pretty annoyed with the whole situation. Some pretty clear reluctance to help people would have been really nice earlier in the show, but at least we have something like that here. Kirito's fight with the giant fish is surprisingly entertaining, giving him some more exaggerated facial expressions and body language, and giving him some short witty lines does so much more to make him likable. Strange that this random filler episode has a fight that's more memorable than almost any other up to this point, but it really is. It actually made me giggle and had me smiling the whole time. Asuna rolls over the fish in one shot though, and the fun is over because Heathcliff is calling. Before they leave, they say goodbye to the fisher dude, who goes on about he had given up on life and just decided to fish. Asuna then talks about how at the beginning of the game she felt similar. She would just cry every night 'cause she felt like another day of her life was stolen from her. Because of this, all she was focused on was winning at the game. But when she saw Kirito chilling in the shade, her attitude started to change. It's a nice detail. It definitely adds to their relationship. And again, this is all really good stuff, but at some point you have to do a little more with these ideas. I feel like I've written some bit about these dynamics in maybe every other episode, but they start to lose impact when you just mention them over and over. Maybe instead of just talking about this idea over and over, really find some impactful way to show how the game has affected the mental state of some players. But I think generally, at least this Fisher dude kinda shows that in some way. Anyway, they go to Heathcliff, and he tells them the whole scouting party got wiped, so they need to go fight the boss. Kirito asks Asuna to stay behind, and she gets pissed because of course she would. What a dumb thing to ask. Instead of just dismissing this dumbass question, though, she adds to the cringe by saying if he went alone and died, she would kill herself. Hard not to be convulsing from cringe at this point, but from here the conversation gets slightly more interesting when Kirito suggests they just run away and chill in the forest forever. As far as he's concerned, it would basically be as good as living in the real world, but Asuna brings up that the real bodies are probably dying in a hospital, so they likely don't have too much time left. Which is weird he hasn't thought of this, but maybe he just didn't care to think about it. It's a pretty bad scene overall, but it's over, and they decide they need to go fight. So they go to the boss room. Nothing's there, but oh no, it's above them, and it's bad CG. Truly terrifying stuff. The bad CG kills a bunch of them, but then with the power of teamwork, they start taking them down, and the episode ends. Final episode of the Aincrad arc, and if it feels like it shouldn't be the final episode at this point, that's because it probably shouldn't be. I think even the most staunch defenders of SEO will recognize the insane amount of problems with this ending. They kill the boss, which keep in mind is only the boss of the 75th floor, and then Detective Kirito randomly just attacks the commander of the Knights of the Blood Oath and realizes it's Kaguya. This really feels so dumb, and this really needed to be foreshadowed earlier to not come off super dumb. Even a single line of Kirito speculating that maybe Kaguya was a player would have done so much to make this feel less awful. He says he realized it because there's nothing more boring than watching someone else play an RPG, which is really so stupid. Literally just look at Twitch and YouTube to see how unbelievably wrong this is. Kaguya says he is the final boss, and since they figured it out, they don't need to wait for the 100th floor. He gives Kirito a chance for the 1v1 to win it all, and Kirito goes for it. Kirito gives thanks to the homies, Klein and Eagle, I don't know how to pronounce that, which is a pretty nice moment. Unfortunately, he then makes one of the cringiest requests in all of anime when he asks Kaguya to make it so Asuna can't kill herself if he dies. First off, weird. Second off, chill with the ego, bro. You're like 16. She'll probably get over you. And finally, kind of an unfair request, just yoink her autonomy like that, but I guess. It's a decent fight. The strong difference in demeanor is kind of cool. Kaguya's just super calm and confident, while Kirito is like angry and swinging wildly, more like a berserker than a swordsman. Eventually Kirito's sword breaks though, and oh no, he's gonna die, but Asuna uses the power of love to break out of paralysis just at the right time and save him. Kind of a dumb moment, because I have no idea why she wouldn't just block with her sword instead of her body. Like, at least try to use your sword, even if you aren't fast enough to draw, like, at least make an effort. She dies though, Kirito loses his mind a little, grasping at the air as her little particles fade away. He then picks up the sword and just like kind of starts waving it at Kaguya. Clearly having like given up on life. I do actually kind of like this emotional reaction, even if the road to get here is a little sus. I like it when shows convey a powerful sense of grief. In the movie Rascal Does Not Dream of a Dreaming Girl. Side note, I love that show. My god, the titles are too long. When Mai dies in Sakura's place, does a really good job of showing the absolute mental breakdown of Sakura, like seeing this calm, confident, witty person screaming in agony and spending like days completely deadpan, just going through the motions of existing is so uncomfortable to watch. That's what makes it so powerful. I don't think that this reaches that level at all. But Kirito is not nearly as deep of a character as Sakura. So with that in mind, they're working with what they got. I think they did a decent job. Anyways, Kaguya smacks the Elucidator away, gives Kirito the big stab, and Kirito dies. But for some reason, as he's dying, he just doesn't actually die and goes sicko mode and stabs Kaguya as he's fading away. This is just indefensibly dumb. I think they were going for the moment where the protag has a sword through their chest on the verge of death, blood coming out of their mouth, but they push to the pain and go, not yet, and push the sword even deeper into them, and then in order to close the gap and stab their enemy. This, however, just does not work, even a little bit in a video game world. This only works because in those situations, the person is still barely alive. But when your health hits 0 in a game, you're dead. Unless you bought Guardian Angel, I guess, but, he should just be dead. With that done, though, Aincrad starts to fall apart, and Kirito and Asuna are just chilling in the sky with Kaguya. I guess she died quickly enough within the game ending that it's fine or something. I thought, doesn't the nerve gear fry your brain instantly? Whatever. I think thinking about this episode too much is actually going to fry my brain. Even the most charitable of viewers are going to hit some point in this episode where they're annoyed or confused with how something played out. But the fun isn't over yet, because we have more cringe dialogue to get through, featuring guest star Kaguya. I think we were all excited for this moment on first viewing, because we all wanted to know why Kaguya did it. Why did he trap everyone in the game? Sure, there's some compelling reason for this, right? But oh my god, when Kirito asks him, and this fucking guy says he forgot the reason a long time ago. Are you actually serious? This is the worst possible answer. Even a bad reason would have been fine. Just give us something, anything. A bad answer would have made the conclusion, to this mystery underwhelming, sure, but I could deal with that. This answer just actually disrespects the time I spent watching the show. Kaguya says a bit more nonsense, so that absolutely means nothing. And then Kirsten's just okay, bro, whatever. My dude, how are you not pissed? At least get a little angry about all the people he killed for no reason, apparently. I get you found your gamer wife in the game, but Jesus, dude. Kaguya then decides to just peace out. And Asuna and Kirito have their little moment as the world ends. So they tell each other their real names because I think they think they're going to go back to the world, but then Kirito starts crying because he thinks he failed and they aren't going back. I have no idea what's going on here. Even just typing that last sentence gave me whiplash. Who knows, though, but on that note, the world ends and Kirito wakes up. So, wow, this ending is really so bad. Coming into this episode, my opinion was, it's not a good show, but I think people are a little hard on it. It's generally watchable, and it does have some good moments. This final episode, though, is just rapid firing so many of the most awful ideas in quick succession. It's hard not to just turn on everything that came before it, especially because of how generally mediocre the show was before this. I think this episode is definitely the reason we hear so much about Seo's missed potential. I think it's pretty clear to everyone watching the show that they just needed some more episodes for this arc. I really don't like this ending. I feel like I've spent hours writing complaints about every aspect of this episode. At the same time, though, I think there's also kind of shows something. There are lots of shows with bad endings, but usually I don't remember them at all. This one, however, I remember in detail, even 10 years later. I need a reminder, but some of these cringe lines are still burned into my brain. I think that means there's something here in this show, some sort of charm that makes it likable. And that does make you care about these characters a little bit, at least, as plain as they might be. I want to talk briefly about the Seo Bridge Parody, because I watched it for the first time a few weeks ago, and it's really what inspired me to make this video and go back and rewatch the series. For those of you that don't know, this is a parody of Seo on YouTube, but it does some really interesting things. It's definitely much more lighthearted in tone, and it definitely focuses on comedy a lot, but the characters are actually so much more interesting in this show. In this version of Seo, Kirito actually has a personality. He's a witty asshole. that spends the whole show power tripping because he's more important in the game than he ever has been in real life. It's hard to put into words how much more right this feels and how much more interesting it is to watch. Asuna also has a much stronger personality, and watching her clash with Kirito is endlessly entertaining. A lot of their interactions end up being just them bantering with each other, kind of like Mai and Sakura's relationship. I know I might be referencing that show a little much, but I think it's a really good example of how to make just an immediately compelling relationship. There's a lot I could talk about with this version of SEO, especially some of the interesting ways it handles some of the plot holes in the main show, but for now I don't want to dwell on it too long as it's a topic for a whole other video. For now I want to emphasize that I think what this interpretation does show is how important it is to have more interesting characters, especially Kirito. In my opinion, the really egregious missed potential of SEO is not just the horrible ending and horrible plot holes, but the miss on developing Kirito in an interesting way. There's so many directions they could have taken with this character, with so many interesting dynamics to work with. How being trapped in the game affected him, how the trauma of losing his guild affected him, or how Asuna changed him, are all concepts that are just barely expanded in the main show. Instead, they went for just the most safe, bland protagonist they could think of, which just feels out of place considering how interesting some of the situations around him are. With that all being said, for the conclusion of this video, I want to change my tone a bit and consider a slightly different perspective. I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, most of us loved this show when we were younger. I'm definitely not the only one that got into anime specifically because of this show. I think as we all got older, we watched quite a few videos or read a few posts about how bad this show was and just kind of accepted, yeah, it probably was. Especially as we watched more and more shows, we just kind of accepted the narrative that it was an awful show with just so much waste potential. I think it does a disservice to write the show off like this, though. There is a reason so many people love this show. And the reason it created what is easily the most popular genre of anime in the modern day. SEO has incredibly interesting premise. I think that's undeniable. It's a premise that is, in my opinion, not matched by any other isekai that has come out since its release. There's never been a more interesting connection between the real world and the fantasy world the protagonist is transported to, in my opinion. Most modern isekai barely even bother exploring the real world the character came from at all, which I think is the biggest issue with the genre. Not only this, but it plays into the fantasy that a lot of young dudes have, like getting to live in a video game world. Kirito is incredibly OP, and even though his character is really bland, that allows us to project ourselves onto him. Asuna is also incredibly bland, but at the same time, it makes it difficult to dislike her, so we can just kind of project whatever our dream girl is onto her. When we're young and naive about the world, shows like this that let our imagination just kind of run wild are really incredibly satisfying. And as we grow older and learn more about ourselves in the world, I think most of us want to hear great stories with great characters rather than projecting our own onto a blank canvas. These days I would much rather watch a show about a really interesting character like Mob from Mob Psycho, or a really engaging relationship like Mai and Sakura from Rascal Does Not Dream of a Bunny Girl Senpai. That's just the kind of person I am now, and the way my taste has evolved over time. At the same time though, SEO is a really interesting canvas to draw on, and I think there's value in that too. I know I spent countless nights as a kid dreaming about being Kirito, and yeah, I don't think SEO is a good show after rewatching it, but it will always have a special place in my heart. I guess my grand point is, don't be ashamed if you like SAO. It doesn't mean you have shit taste. We can acknowledge the shortcomings of the show, but still really appreciate it for the memories it gave us, or even just the way it made us feel at a time when our lives were simpler. If you're still watching at this point, holy shit, that's crazy. I appreciate it. This video took so many hours to make. Holy shit. I think the script was like 20 pages long, probably like 30 hours of putting it all together, recording everything. So thanks if you watched all this fucking long ass video. That's crazy. think I already know what I'm going to do next because I had a lot of fun making this, so probably going to do something similar. But if there's anything that you want me to go back and kind of look at, let me know. I'm definitely open to suggestions for things to do in the future. But anyway, thank you for watching.